Our story, the one that defines us, spins a tale of chapters that reveal the origin of our why. Join me in exploring the narratives of changemakers who rise to the moment more often than not, and who are defined not by their achievements, but by the storylines they believe in. Join me, Dr. Rod Berger, as I integrate my new book about storytelling into a conversation that meets the moment. This is The Narrative Edge, a podcast under the banner of Headroom with Dr. Rod Berger, presented by our friends at Rig Productions. And now, onto our show. Welcome back to another episode of The Narrative Edge. You know, for those that follow me and have thankfully appreciate those that have purchased my book and listened to the audiobook and just, I guess, listened to my interviews over the years, you know that I have been incredibly intentional about not being intentional with the types of guests, the backgrounds, the sectors that maybe that they work in. And, you know, through the years, people would say to me, well, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you focus on one area? I don't know about you, but I've found that the human experience is made up of a kaleidoscope of people, backgrounds, professions, experiences, successes, and failures. And you know what? Along the way, I am proud to say I've made several friends taking that approach. And this is a sort of a blast from the past interview with Dr. Marcus Conyers, who I know that I interviewed a couple of times over the years, but it's been probably longer than either one of us want to admit, and how many years have passed. But you know what's wonderful about it, that the power of stories, that when you reconnect with people, you don't there's no preamble. You're ready to go right out of the gate. And that to me is really powerful. And so we're in for a treat today. And I want to give Marcus's background, his bio, but also BrainSmart and the company that he co-founded um, years ago, and that has just been incredible in what it's achieved and what it's still going and doing for people all across the world. So let me just give the formal introduction, Marcus, and then we'll get going. But Dr. Marcus Conyers is the founder and CEO of BrainSmart, a global leader in helping organizations increase innovation, productivity, and growth by putting big ideas from brain research into practice. He developed the world's first doctoral course in brain-based leadership and is the author of 20 books, including Positively Smarter: Science and Strategies for Increasing Happiness, Achievement, and Well-Being, which launched as a bestseller in cognitive psychology with Wiley. He's a global keynote speaker and innovation consultant who has been supporting organizations in 30 countries over the last 30 years. His passion is for sharing practical, science-based frameworks and strategies that executives can apply immediately to make a positive impact in their organization. He is also the developer of the BrainSmart AI program, which we're going to get into. But a little bit more about BrainSmart. So BrainSmart since 1998 has been led by obviously Marcus and Dr. Donna Wilson, and they've been developing and implementing their pioneering BrainSmart program in the context of education and business, and they've worked with more than 160,000 leaders, trainers, and educators, reaching millions of participants around the world. Marcus, are you tired? I think would be my first question.
I'm so excited every day. I wake up with this mission.
It is incredible, and really I can't. I mean, I feel like we could be past the decade since the last interview. How the years go
It's
by
about
so.
Yeah, maybe it's 8 years, but
Okay,
it's like
maybe.
you say, it's like you said, it's like when I fly back to Cambridge and I row in the bumps most years. I haven't seen some of my friends that I rowed with 50 years ago for 30 years, but I'm still insulting them. I remember what they did back, so it's the same thing. We reconnect. Friends reconnect with the stories, don't we?
We do. Let me start with this. Take me back. We're going to get into BrainSmart, all the work that you've been doing, and obviously now your work in AI and these different elements. But I want to understand your relationship with, really, it would sound sort of cheeky, as you might say, but like your relationship with your own mind, and when you started to get fascinated with the brain. Was there something that influenced you growing up? Because the people that I have known in my life that have been in your sort of neck of the clinical, you know, and the sort of the research space, there's just this wonderment about the brain and what it can do for all of us that maybe started quite early for many of them.
Well, it absolutely started, and I love your word wonderment because that's exactly what it is. So here it is. I've always had a mind that was trying to work out why some things work and why other things don't. and why organizations mostly focus on continuing doing things that don't work. I'll give you an example. In school, I would work very hard and do my homework like 2, 3 hours a night. And next morning, my brain was almost innocent of anything that I've done. And I'm sure some of our listeners and viewers. But then this British comedy show came on TV, Monty Python's Flying Circus, with John Cleese. And suddenly, everybody in my school could remember every word of every sketch, and they were performing it. So, with your background, Rob, there were two stimuli. There was one, my school homework, result zero learning. There was Monty Python's Flying Circus, where we remembered everything when we were sharing the sketches. And I thought, how is it the same brain that can fail to learn anything with one stimulus, could learn superbly? And I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll go down to the bookstore and find a book about how the brain learns. That was my stroke of insight. I thought, I'm learning with my brain. I've never been taught a single thing about how to make my brain work or learn, but I've been expected to perform. I went into Heffer's bookstore. So if you ever go to Cambridge, Heffer's bookstore is where it's the most beautiful bookstore. It's been there forever. And I walked in and I said, and I was very young, so I said, could you send me to the brain section? They said, yes, it's over there. And the first book I found was a book on lobotomy. And I thought, no, that's not going to help. And then I found one book by a guy called Tony Buzan, who was way ahead of his time. And it was about how to learn and use your brain. And it was full of great strategies that I began to apply, Rod, right away.
Really?
And and the principles were similar to Monty Python if you could connect the dots. And that was my journey. I thought, well, why aren't we teaching everybody how to learn in the way the brain has these natural strengths? So that was the start of that process. And to continue to arc that story into the future, when I ended up in the 70s that you mentioned earlier on, I got to meet with John Cleese, who was one of the key characters.
An icon, right?
Because he was at the Footlights at Cambridge, very creative. And I was doing this campaign for Sony. And what was happening at the time in Britain, people didn't really like the idea of a piece of equipment from Japan sitting in their living room, because in England, the telly is a part of the family. You probably like your telly more than your uncle, if you were. And then, so we hired him, and we created a robot version, a 6-foot robot version of John Cleese doing the silly walks. And he came onto the screen, he said, you remember me? And this robot had a mustache. Those awfully nice people at Sony have asked me to introduce you to the Sony Trinitron television. And it was wonderful. He was a great guy. And after that, sales of this particular brand of TV just grew up. They went through the roof, and it created all of this employment for people in the Welsh villages who've been wiped out, when the coal mines went down. So right from the beginning, I've been making the connection between brain science and business and innovation and how it works. So thank you for that question.
No, what a vivid picture, right? I mean, if anything, what it made me think of, it's almost like a young person who might say, maybe they go somewhere, they're exposed to people that have been working out and athletes or something, and they say, I think I want to get a gym membership. They go in and they start sort of building that muscle, and they're seeing the results, and yet you took a different, right, sort of this parallel path where it's like, I'm going to go into the bookstore and I'm going to bypass the lobotomy section book.
I'm really glad I did that. That was one of life's, forks in the road.
Boy, that was a fork in the road. So here's what's fascinating to me. So I've always had this great curiosity with the brain.
Yes.
I've probably, the amount of thought or energy I would put towards that, I would almost double that when I think about the people like yourself that you're explorers to me. Like I think of like a Dan Siegel and different people that I've read growing up that have embedded themselves in the unknown. And that to me is so fascinating in a world where we've discovered everything that we can, at least from the physical world in that regard. There's nothing on the map we haven't found, but yet the mind, I was just having this conversation with my 11-year-old a couple of months ago. We were talking about, the sort of, you only use 10% of your brain. This adage that I don't know if it's true anymore. Maybe it's quite frankly, but you and your contemporaries, that you really are explorers in ways where there's some level of comfort I would have to glean in the not knowing, and that it does not prevent you from continuing on this journey where you don't know what is around the corner, or if there's a corner that exists, it could be just one long, dark hallway in sort of the annals of one's mind. Have you thought about yourself in that way, and how do you understand that sort of picture that I'm painting about people that have been willing, I think, to contribute to our own understanding of ourselves through the brain?
I think it's very interesting. When we produced one of our books with Columbia University, which was applying this at university settings, there was a researcher from Israel who was 94 at the time. He was the first one to come back with a blurb.
Really?
And he said the authors are like explorers taking us into a new realm. So this guy, even at 94, he was still exploring. He was saying the same thing. And what I've come to realize is that in a sense, we are born to be explorers about our own brains. And we all can be every single day. This is the power of what I write about in Positively Smarter, which is practical metacognition, which is really being aware of your own thoughts that walk into your mind every day, being aware of them and see how they influence your life, and to understand that every day our thoughts and our ideas are literally shaping the physical structure of our brains. The excitement about that is we get to shape who we become every day by what we think, say, and do. So in a sense, I've been blessed to be around colleagues who are official explorers, but we can all be in every day, like your 11-year-old daughter. I can just tell from the conversations we've had, she's fascinated about what's going on in the world and what pops up in her mind as a result of it.
Oh, she's a wonderment in that regard. It's always keeping me on my toes. So, okay, this is what's interesting to me. There's this, we live in a world, maybe this is a secondary benefit of AI and just sort of the evolution of technology and sort of where we're going. But, most of us have grown up in a world where we feel very good about answers, and the answer is the goal. And yet, at some point in your work and your scholarship, you have found that this is a point in time when you wanted to put a flag in the ground and document what it is that you found, what you found interesting, and how to apply what you've discovered in these sort of associations that we can apply in these different environments, right? Tell me about that process of thinking through when I would imagine it's your gut, that while you have an answer today and a book has just been published, that it's a little bit like driving that car off the lot that depreciates the minute those four wheels cross the threshold onto the main road. How do you balance that and still feel confident about what you've written over the years? Because I've always wondered about that.
That's a great question, because I think the absolute reverse of what you just said. But this is why you and I always have these great conversations. Because what happens is, here is an insight, which is a best guess at the moment, and insights are like the first domino on future insights.
Uh,
So,
Almost like it's like a revealing, like you're on some like exploration or a treasure hunt, and it's one clue begets the next clue. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
yes, and also expounding on, I'm going to use a new word called ignorancing. So what I mean by ignorancing is the bliss of knowing that you don't know. You started our interview together. There's an excitement in this space. In those old maps, they used to say, "There be dragons," right? Right?
Yeah.
I'm now starting to think, there be gold in the place where we're currently ignorant. It's the ideas that we haven't brought to fruition yet. And so things that we've discovered so far are almost like direction pointers in the next phase. But it's never final. It's giving you momentum towards the next level of thing that we can understand.
See, now I appreciate that, Marcus. The way that I hear that is that the frame of that is instead of being sort of feeling worrisome that it's going to be received as it's already out of date, and like, why would you sort of at that point in time? This is about framing. These are foundational pieces so that if we're going to advance, we have to sort of truncate and say, okay, this is what we know now. And then you take that and you build upon that. It's like this is corresponding back and forth. It's almost like you're scaling a mountain and you're just going from ledge to ledge.
It's like a bunch of peaks. Each peak takes you up further, and then you realize, oh, here's all this other stuff we don't know. And you explore that. And that's the exhilaration of the process. And I go back to this is something we can all explore every day when we focus on how are our brains working today? What do they pick up? What are they learning? In every, like when I'm working with executives, what I love about them, they're all so brilliant. They're working so hard, they're under so much pressure. And what I tell them, this is really funny. I say, you only have to be a good executive 8 minutes at a time.
8 minutes at a time.
8 minutes at a time. Be a good executive for 8 minutes at a time. So when you're presenting or you're in a meeting, just be your best executive self for 8 minutes. Then relax and take in everything that's going on after that. Relax and read the room. What is the response to what you said? Pick up on the nonverbal communication because we're all explorers in this new world where we're moving together. And every time we pay attention to the outer world, really pay attention and learn our lessons, our brains are getting more and more powerful and more effective in everything that we're doing every day.
How do we balance that, Marcus, with a world where I find more people are a bit trepidatious about what their next is going to be? And so it's almost like the anti-explorer, right? They don't want to take in the
Yes.
environment because they're very nervous about potentially what that means for their future. Everything from the jobs that they currently hold that they think might be wiped away from AI to conflicts and wars around them. I mean, you sort of add all of these things up and they're like the book, The Anxious, what is it? Anxious Nation of young people.
The
And
Anxious
so
Generation, John
generation,
Haidt.
that's right.
Yeah.
And so how do we balance that out? Because it feels to me, because I'm like you, I do, that's the excitement of every day, right? You just don't know. Like, we don't know the stories we're going to interface with, the personalities, just all those elements that sort of get us excited about whatever next is and how we apply that. I think about all the people that get stuck and they don't want to know what's going on in their mind or their brain in that manner, right? The knowing is the Pandora's box, and they don't necessarily feel equipped to be able to, I guess, filter through all of that.
Well, I can understand that. And there's the welcome to the work week, you know.
Yeah, I know. It's true.
But
Yeah.
but it's also there's a but also the only reason Rod and Marcus get to have this chat through this technology is human beings are kind of good at surviving through difficult things. What we're facing today is way easier than what the people with the brains just like us 200,000 years ago were taken care of. But why are they still around? Why are we still around? With their DNA is that our brains have this fantastic capacity to adapt and grow and change. We're the most our brains are the most resilient adaptive system that has ever been invented in the universe that we know so far. If we have one super skill, it's actually doing well when things get difficult because we can adapt our behavior. And I understand people can get into these anxiety loops. I have an understanding for that. So what I suggest to executives, so I ask them, how long do you want to do that for during the day? You know, have a timer. How much time do you want to spend being anxious and worrying about stuff? And how much time do you want to spend actually upgrading your brain so you can deal with it and helping other people do it? And this is about being metacognitive,
Yeah.
which is it's kind of the super skill that humans have, but it's not taught, Rod. It's not taught in most systems, but it's the number one skill because when you can take a step back, remember that scene in The Matrix? I'm going back to old films, but remember that scene when the hero suddenly sees the Matrix. He steps back and see the system. These bullets are coming at him. He's just knocking them away. It is a metaphor as old as time, going back to Greek mythology. And the key that all executives, everyone listening to us, we have to take a step back every day to really see what's really going on and where do we want to invest our energy and budget out how much time do we want to spend being anxious, how much time do we want to spend getting better. And that separation between stimulus, like anxiety is like a stimulus response system. You'll know this from your background more than me.
Hmm.
And the stimulus is offering itself. You don't have to respond the way you've always responded.
Yeah. The cookie is being presented.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm glad we sort of arrived here. I was talking about sort of the stories we'll talk about going down the lazy river, right, of narrative here. Where are we? Give me the sort of the state of where we are, because you made that comment about how we don't, in essence, teach this. In essence, over these years, these 30 years, are we getting better at integrating in these lessons, sort of system wide? And I know the answer to this, right? I fear that I know the answer to this, but I'm wondering why. Why is it? So maybe I'm answering my own question, but help me understand the state of where we are right now in our understanding of how we should integrate in the brain science into the way in which we approach the world through learning and et cetera, et cetera.
I can only give you like a bird's eye view from the systems that I've looked at. I've seen virtually no change in
No
the
change.
30 years where I've been working within it. And the reason is I'm a big fan. I was very fortunate to go to business school way back when, and then when one of my early jobs was I became head of advertising and marketing for British Caledonian Airlines. So I got to go around the world working with different cultures, developing ad campaigns. And when I was in Japan, I heard the story about W.E. Deming. And W.E. Deming is probably the world's best expert on how systems work. And how systems work is they work to protect the system generally. So in any situation, according to him, about 94% of results are produced by the system and 6% by special causes. So what tends to happen is like business training systems are set up and they tend to run doing the things that have kept them alive for all of this time. School systems are the same way. Most teachers aren't taught about making metacognition a process. And so this is why we built BrainSmart, actually, because we weren't seeing it happening. And so we built BrainSmart to be a bridge between this great brain science that people love to learn, Rod. They love to learn it and apply it. They tell their families, their friends, they move it in their businesses. But the institutions aren't set up really to bring in new research and apply it as a priority. So to answer your question, it's not going well yet, but we have great potential to make it
What's the
work much
fear?
better.
If you had to guess, I mean, what is the fear? I mean, I could sit here and muse about how, if we can't monetize it in the Western world, then we're not going to apply it. If we can't fit it into this schedule that we have for a given day or a week or a semester, we're not going to integrate it in, right? I'm just so curious as to why. What is the biggest fear in your estimation?
I think people are very afraid of learning. I call it, sort of eduphobia
That's
because
a big statement. I hope people hear that, like, afraid of learning, and I can't argue with you in that.
because when you first learn everything, it's difficult and you're not good at it. So in leadership and management, and I've met some fantastic leaders and managers, but they're very rare. They think very differently. Why am I telling you this? You
No, but
know
it's
this.
important. No, but no, but you're right that they are almost like it's like the National Geographic has like the ghost elephant or something out right now. It's this mysterious legend of an elephant that only the local tribes know of and they're in search of.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
But what the way they see the world is they're brave. They're braver. They have more courage because what they say is, what's important is I'm leading a team. I've got their livelihoods in my hands. I'm going to learn the best I can and I'm going to fail. I'm going to fumble, but I'm going to do the best job I can to help them get to be the best they can be. And these are not big ego people, Rod. They put their people first, and everybody knows it. When you walk in a room with one
The
of these
energy,
leaders,
you can feel it.
and you can see how you see the smiles on the team members, because when he's fumbling or she's fumbling, when they're learning something useful that's going to work in the future, they're released to do the same because they know he won't be or she won't be punitive with them. So you have this upward spiral of improving performance.
See, and that to me is the intersection of where I think you and I are kindred spirits in this regard, because to me, that's where story plays
Yes.
such a role.
Yes.
Because it may not be in sort of your, let's say, your public facing sort of expression of your DNA, right? You just may not have that sort of charisma in the way you walk into a room with jokes and whatever it is, right? Just sort of this
Right.
energy. If you understand the goal of connection and
Yes.
trust between yourself and other human beings, you're much more thoughtful in the stories that you craft to express your own experience over time that will allow that individual or that team to sort of sidle up next to you because they get it. Even if you're of different generations, it's like, I've been there. And they're saying, I'm here right now. And it's not punitive in nature, as if I've accomplished it and you're far down the tracks. And that's where
Yes.
story plays such a key role. It's not press releases, it's not
No.
spreadsheets or balance sheets. It's about the journey. Because once you know the journey, now I want to connect. I want to spend. It's not just Dr. Conyers. It's Marcus. Why is it Marcus? Well,
No.
Marcus, I can joke about British humor, and there are different elements of you that go far beyond your LinkedIn profile. And it seems so subtle to me, but for whatever reason, people are deathly afraid of really diving into their story. Like I go back to the students I worked with for years at Vanderbilt. All they would send me, Marcus, would be their resume. The most interesting things about these kids, these young people, were at the bottom of the resume or the back page. Not all the things that showed how similar they were to each other, but that someone worked some side job as a dishwasher because they were the first in their family to graduate college.
Yeah,
Far more interesting.
well, this is, sorry to interrupt you, but this is why I love your book. And when I was listening to your book, I was having the most wonderful parallel experience because you're such a good storyteller. And especially as I listened to it, because you love to tell stories. And as we spoke about, look, I can see you running what I call a brain movie. As you're telling a story, you're seeing this brain movie, and I'm running a similar movie. And then I've got a split screen running parallel movies. And when I listened to your book, it really helped me put together that pretty much everything I've done, and we said is about story catching, the stories of how I was so terrible at things, which I have been. I start off terrible at everything I'm good at now.
You and me both, buddy.
Oh, yeah. I've got one. I bet you never put a professional video together to do professional speaking when the videographer fell asleep.
No, but that is a fantastic opening to like a new stream, a show you would stream, right? That's a fantastic opening.
So that story, and then I loved. Then I'm thinking I'm doing keynotes in Cape Town to thousands of leaders and catching and casting stories out. But the key thing from that story about my videographer falling asleep, I was telling stories like my English professor did in the 60s. And I had no vision of how I was coming across. So,
So you were like you were telling,
yeah,
right? You weren't sort of bringing people along in that space.
No, and I didn't have an audience. So that was
clearly you had an audience of one, and it was just yourself.
Yeah. But to carry that on, the most effective executives do two things very well that I've been coaching them on, but because of your book, I've managed to frame it into what I shared with you. Story catching is, that room we just made a brain movie of. There's an executive in a room with a bunch of people they work with. Finding one of those people doing something really great in the organization that is absolutely core to the mission, like how they treat a customer or how they did a job nobody else wanted to do and just did it and didn't make a big deal of it. Catching that story and then casting it to the group to say, you know what I really learned from Mary Ellen yesterday? I was so impressed. She was here late. She had to get a babysitter in, but she was there to finish that job so that Harry could go out and finish that presentation and help us bring it. Recognizing that story is fantastic. So that story catching and story casting is how we get everybody up the spiral.
It's so powerful what you just said. That to me is like handing out a personalized Hallmark card to every one of those team members in the audience. And it's not even their story. You're sharing it about one story. You've caught one story and now you're casting it out in a way that says you recognize the humanity of the people that you decide, you decide to work with and share your time with. That's what you're doing in that moment.
And there's an addition to this that I've been thinking about since our conversation. I call it the frontocracy. So the frontocracy to me, and this is from a man that grew up with a king and queen in England. What I have found with executives and leaders, you've got to keep your frontocracy front of mind. Your frontocracy are the people who do the real work every day with your clients and your customers. All of the wisdom is there. And when you catch their stories about how they really do it and you cast those stories, you're doing the best thing you can to lead your organization.
Yeah, you're building, this is when people, I don't know how you would ever calculate this, right? But to me, it's even if that employee spends 5 minutes more on something, just because they feel as if they are contributing, right? Because you know the inverse of that. If you don't feel like you are valued in that, in sort of the
Yeah.
calculus of that larger business or objective, people check out. My kids are at this stage now where they're doing a bunch of group work at school, and depending upon who's contributing or not, I mean, people just check out. So you don't have to be our age or our ages or my kid, but it's just a natural tendency. You want to feel that what you're doing matters.
Which is why it goes back to the first thing. We need to be paying attention to everyone. We need to be noticing, actively noticing. That's why I was talking about being executive in 8-minute chunks. There's
Mhm.
sometimes you have to get chunks of work done and then noticing how are people responding. Really paying attention to that makes a big difference. So I just want to hook back to British Caledonian because I've got a great story for you because this job came in the Sunday Times for the head of advertising and marketing for British Caledonian. It was the most aggressive creative airline in Europe. Everybody wanted this job. I wanted this job. So I thought, how am I going to do it? And I imagined the guy who was going to interview me, who was the MD and founder. He was a World War II hero, and I was going to go in front of him, and I had to convince him to hire me. And the only reason I could convince him is if I was convinced I was the best person to do the job. I went out and I went story catching to all about 17 top London travel agents to say, what do you think about British Caledonian? What do you like about it? What don't you like it? What could I do if I'm there to help you double your business with them? And they told me. So when I showed up for this interview, there's the usual stuff. I just launched Miller Lite into the UK. So I had a reputation for being successful. And at the end of the meeting, he says, is there anything else? I said, yes.
I'm glad you asked.
I'm glad you asked. When I went out to do my research about what your airline is, here's what I found. You're doing okay with this. You've got a great opportunity with this. And here's my business plan. Here is what I think we can generate in revenue in year one. So would you like to hire me? This guy looked at me and they hired me pretty much on the spot. Marcus isn't anything special, but the stories, the story catching and the story casting of how to make his airline more successful made all the difference.
And if I can sort of jump into your story here, you're also sending a message to him that his work matters. It mattered enough that you went out and schlepped it to 17 different places, right? Having to go through that process, like just that alone, even the energy. I would think that even if maybe you were wrong on your assessment or he didn't potentially agree, you still get bonus points and you probably would have put yourself, no matter what, in that sort of top 3 or a finalist role because you're sending this message that says, I thought about you when we weren't even in this meeting. I think we might have talked about that in a previous conversation, you
Yeah.
and I, that we're so simple as human beings. If you or I know that someone has thought about us in some way that is, I
Yes.
guess, positive or reflective of our lives when we're not there, something happens inside of us that
Yes.
just makes us feel good. It also makes us, then you return the favor. You think of that person in a different light, right? I had dinner on Friday night with a family before we went to a school play, right? Sort of a very
Right.
Western thing to do. And that father, relayed this story to me and sort of how he had interpreted something. He sent me a text message 2 days ago. He'd spent like 5 days thinking about this, reflecting on what we talked about, and he
Yes.
wanted to follow up on that. And it wasn't even sort of the substance of the text message. It was that, my goodness, that conversation stayed with him to the point where he then made the effort. Effort is
Yes.
everything, is it not?
Yes.
There's something in our brain that triggers and says, green light, good friend, good opportunity, keep going. This is a good path to go down.
Yes, but and also, I'm going back 200,000 years ago. Who do we trust in our tribe? Because trust is survival.
Yeah, I mean, who do we feel safest, right? Around.
Who do we want to lead us? Who do we actually want to pay attention to? And we pay attention to people who pay attention to us because they're people who are capable of paying attention for someone else other than themselves. It really comes down to that. And this is why, especially in the age of AI where we're moving to, I want everybody kind of every day pay more attention to other people. Listen, catch their stories and share your stories. This is your human edge.
You're going to have to. Don't you think to me, it's not even, a lot of people think it's an option right now. I would contend, Marcus, but you tell me, I don't think it's going to be an option in the very, very near future. Because if everything's sort of stripped away, it's going to be that human connection that we have. It's going to be the curiosity that we have with our friends and neighbors and loved ones that's going to keep us not only afloat, but thinking positively at the horizon line that we're looking at or casting our
Well,
eyes upon.
well, and on the other horizon line, so I was thinking about something else we were sharing when we were last speaking, and what I really realized about innovation is innovating is my lane. That's my one job because we are now have to be. We all need to be innovating. Machines can be repeating algorithms. Innovating is really the key. And how do we innovate? We innovate essentially by all the stories that are in our neuroverse, all the stories we've caught and captured over the years by listening to different people, by listening to Rod's podcast, reading your books, reading your stories. That creates the neuroverse of potential ideas that we bring together to innovate. Now, take all the ideas we have in our neuroverse and have a bunch of people, that imaginary executive with their team. We've got a diverse neuroverse of ideas who could come together to invent and implement and create powerful new ideas. And that's the key forward for humans.
I just love that neuroverse. As you said that, I wrote down, it's almost like a mental library. It's
Yes.
like going back to, you use The Matrix, but like another movie reference. I love movies. Minority Report with Tom Cruise, where
Yes. When he's moving the things
he's
around.
moving things around.
Yes.
To the
Sorry.
point where you're mapping, and we talked about our own individual writing processes, but for me, I knew I would be in a zone or in the zone, that feeling, when I could very rapidly sort of scan, to your point, that neuroverse, that catalog of all these different people and places, and in that moment, create those associations that then
Yes.
became part of a chapter, became part of, right? That to me, that's from my own exploration, I love that with the mind. Like, how do you do that, where you learn over time that, wow, if I listen to my instrumental music before I sit down to do anything creative, it's almost like telling my brain, it's like stretching before going back to the gym,
Yeah.
right? You're doing that. So let's pivot to the work that you're going to be doing now in AI. You and Don, you're trusted voices in this space and working with executives in schools and all. Help me understand your approach to AI. How are you, outside of what you're going to be offering and the different work that you're doing, help me understand your own personal relationship with the notion of AI, because there's this sort of great irony and sort of the what people might think is the like, we're uploading our knowledge, or we're outsourcing our knowledge. I've heard people talk about. So it's, by sort of definition, it's saying we're taking our brain and we're subbing it out for something else that's exterior to us.
Well, I think it's a great question. And where I'm coming to, because I'm observing everything about AI with all of these different voices with completely different motivations. You can just hear it. There are some people it's going to change the world, some people it won't. And I've been talking to people from McKinsey, from all of these different areas. And then I take a step back, take the step back and see the system. And what I'm seeing is, historically, anything that can be done more cheaply with a machine will always be done more cheaply by a machine.
We kind of have a history. We have the receipts.
We got the receipts. That's happening for certain. And then my next question, because we were talking about questions, it's about the question. We need to be asking really serious questions in that. So what is, and I call this, what are our URAVs? What are our unique, relevant, added values as a human being that we bring to ourselves in an organization? I'm using this precisely. Our unique, relevant, added values. And what we're really bringing is our neuroverse of stories and ideas that we bring together. And I don't know if you've had this experience, Rob, when I compare my understanding, and I'm, average guy, maybe I read a few more books, but when I look at what AI does, it's so weak. It's like a mediocre machine. It takes all the mediocre stuff and lays it out conveniently.
My flip on that would be, and what I have found, and I found it fascinating in this way. I've always been the proponent. I mean, it's just sort of a very rudimentary phrase, sort of that garbage in, garbage out, right? What I have found in my studying of AI models and trying to build up my own understanding and skills and how this applies. You put in good information, you put in good content, and you ask good questions
Yes,
so you understand it, right? You think of it as a story in that regard. Really fascinating
you
results.
do.
Now, those that I've found that have struggled to some degree, like friends of mine that are, let's say, of a younger generation that are trying to just automate everything, right? That's sort of their, like, let's take their agency or their firm and flip it on its head and automate this. They're not putting anything in. They're just asking it to produce from nothing something. And that's when I've found the struggle. So I don't know how sort
Yeah.
of wide that chasm is, but I have found that if I put in sort of interesting, compelling scholarship, and then I couple that with really interesting associations and questions, I get really incredible results. And I'm not saying that, I mean, there are obviously, I am nowhere near where I want to be with understanding it. But I do think it's incredible when we think about it, because to me, it actually supports what you're saying. Because if you're fully accessing your own neuroverse, if that's even sort of a way to put it, or those that are accomplished, and you apply that in to these worlds, I don't know, it really is mind bending in a lot of ways.
I think I really agree with you. So I was thinking that is the level one. So the average use of AI produces very average results. Now, what's going to be happening? And this is what I'm going to be encouraging. And I'm on a learning journey with this, like everyone else is. But
On the
I'm
boat.
but I'm putting the neuroverse first. I'm a neuroverse first, which is I would encourage everybody to grow your own neuroverse. Read a lot. Talk to a lot of people, get lots of ideas. What are you bringing to the party? Because your neuroverse is the place where these great questions can come from that you can feed into AI. And then the AI can come back with stuff that you feed into your neuroverse. And it's going to be this weaving together that can be absolutely phenomenal.
How do you think, Marcus? So, what is your opinion on in the work of BrainSmart and AI? So I don't even know if it's a concern, more sort of to be aware of. I think sort of the typical approach is that a lot of people are sort of closed off to new information. To your point, not really wanting to learn, or you have a better way of saying it than I just did.
Phobic, not wanting to look foolish while you're learning and demonstrating new things.
So, okay, very well put. Is that because of that, the access code to our neuroverse feels like some ancient code, tied to the pyramids that we can't figure out because we haven't been practicing, right? We have been, if anything, we've been practicing pushing back and not allowing all of these stories in the neuroverse to literally be what that intimates it is, to flourish. And so all of a sudden now people are going to say, maybe I should have thought about the associations of what I've been doing my whole life. How do they all connect and fit? What are the patterns? Like, I think the people that have been doing that or trying, they've been the pursuit of understanding that will adapt faster than those that have been living in a world where I really don't want to think about those things. I bury that in the bottom of my resume. This is what I do. And they sort of march along. Am I wrong?
I think everything in life, some people find it easier than others, but this is why we have leaders. What's a leader's job? Well, a leader, you got to do two things. Sorry, I'll stop shouting. You got to do two things. One is you go first so people can see what you're doing.
Well, true.
And then secondly is to encourage everybody in your team to upgrade their brains and give them the confidence and the encouragement. It comes back to this story because everybody's got you know this as well as I do. When we're traveling in the world, when I'm on a long flight, I can't wait to get into the cab and listen to the stories of the cab driver.
Oh,
right?
yes, exactly.
And you're not, and cab driver would never claim to be a genius of like things, but boy, did they have stories about their neck of the woods, breathtakingly, brilliantly portrayed. So everybody has far more inside than they're aware of. It's not that it's not there, which is kind of I really like your concept of the narrative edge. And it's my experience, especially of listening to the book. I went back on a story catching journey back to the 70s. And we all have this capacity to do this. And then outside of that is to be aware and just have conversations with people, have story catching conversations because it's a skill like everybody else's. And everybody on every team knows something that other people don't or has a skill set. And that to me is what good leadership is about, uncovering the potential. And remember the studies that they did, I think it was at Google, and they found that the IQ of the individual team members didn't make much difference. It was how they would work together to get everybody's ideas out. And
We are social beings.
we're social beings. We got social brains. The reason we got big brains is two things: omega-3 from the sea, and we have to be very good at socializing, with our default brain network about looking at everybody. What are they thinking? Understanding it. So ironically, I think that AI gives us a chance to step back and see the genius and beauty of the human brain as a creative and problem-solving system that can be assisted by AI, and that it's a fantastic time to encourage everybody to unlock more of their brain's potential.
I just love that frame that you just applied to it because it's celebratory in what we've accomplished. There's a level of an appreciation. There's a flavor of that where we have, and I think we have to do that to be able to understand, to your point, what can we uniquely contribute and add value to, right? Sort of what is our role in this evolving story that is sort of now just exploded with opportunity for what next is. Let's close this conversation with this, Marcus. I started off talking a little bit about sort of you being an explorer and those that sort of swim in similar pools as you. I'm so curious, and I think this really is a question geared towards the student and student of any age, but to understand your relationship with success in a field where, unless you plan on living hundreds of years, I don't know if we'll ever get to an end point to say, and I actually think this is a good thing, that we have, in essence, this is the answer, right? This is the blueprint. We've solved the whole thing. When it comes to our brain, our capabilities, and the way in which we think, and the different levels of intelligences, and the way those sort of get displayed and played out in stories across the world and across cultures. But how do you now think at this point in your career? How do you think about your relationship to success? And is there a kernel within that story that can be applied to a world where I think young people are going to have to redefine for all of us how we understand success in the projects and the challenges that we and they tackle moving forward?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I really never think about that word success. That seems like 1980s. Now, what I see it as, what is going to make your daughter, kids adults that work for them feel good? It's when you create unique, relevant, added value, whatever it is. I've heard you speak about someone that bags groceries at Kroger, right? Now, he has a unique, relevant, added value because he's him, and he makes you feel good for that little bit time of that day.
Absolutely.
Now, you multiply that to when I'm doing a keynote with thousands of people, what I'm thinking is I'm story casting my unique, relevant, added value to make their lives a bit better. And that feels great. And that's an achievement. And then my favorite thing is I get off the stage and I'm hanging out with everybody. And as you know, you learn 10 times more than you've shared. And so whatever you're doing, if you're caring for someone, if you're caring for an aging parent and creating your unique, relevant, added value, there's something in that that is so powerful. And to build a life around that wherever you are is going to make a big difference. And the more you learn to think about other people and how you can create value for them, whether you're a CEO of an organization or you're working in Kroger, you're going to have a better life. That's what's within our control. There's a lot of things we can't change, but creating unique, relevant, added value for everyone is what we can do every day.
What I love about you, Marcus, and your work is that there's a childlike curiosity, and it's a
Yeah.
compliment. It's a compliment um, to embracing the unknown in a way that says, "Let's go. Let's see where this takes us." Also knowing, and I'm glad that you sort of level set even me when I was trying to get clarity and understanding what happens when you've written, book 14. Do you feel as if that sort of takes away books 1 through 13, and how does that impact 15? And that these are actually foundational pieces that allow you to scale the mountain at that point in time, and then you find there's another mountain. But that approach to me, one, is incredibly optimistic. It celebrates what it means to be human, which I think we're all searching for. We may not know how to say it or how to pursue it in ways that are either healthy and or productive or supportive of our communities and environments, but that's what we're all in search for. The irony is we're sitting here as humans and yet we want to know. We want to find what it
Yeah.
means to be human. That's the greatest irony, I think, of our species. We want that clarity. And those moments where you connect with somebody that you just met on an airplane or you jumped in an Uber, those somehow enlighten us and make us feel that much more human, right? An
Yes.
understanding of ourselves. And so I love that about you. One, I want our conversations to continue. I want people to support and to follow what you're doing because, to your point, and I completely agree, we have not, I wish systems, we could say, have changed over the last 30 years in the way in which they look at learning and how it applies, not just during the day when the sun is out, but also just 24/7, just how our minds and bodies work and how they work in relation to others and stimuli that either are positive or negative to us as we go on our days. You can go to brainsmart.org. I've always found Marcus to be an incredibly affable individual and professional who, yes, he has his accomplishments and the letters after his name, but he is Marcus through and through. And that says a lot about somebody who's working, I think, in a discipline in an area where sometimes it can feel very heady for those that aren't in it, but you do it in a way that is approachable as an open door policy. It says a lot about you and Donna and what you guys have built at BrainSmart. And I'm just happy to have witnessed a small portion of it over the last 8 to 10 years. We want to thank again Dr. Marcus Conyers, and you can go to brainsmart.org. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger. You've been listening to The Narrative Edge. You can get your copy of the book wherever books are sold. And remember that The Narrative Edge takes you around the world of storytelling, returning you to your story and the moments that define a life in motion. I want to thank my friends at Rig Productions and encourage you to check them out if you're looking to broadcast your ideas. Until next time, my friends, and remember that if you're not in control of your story, well, who is?